Welcome to the show, Ray. How are you doing? Good morning over
I'm
there.
doing wonderful. It's snowing here in Montana, so that's winter. Winter is coming.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that really strike me when I hear your story is you've been very vocal. You've been an evangelist for bootstrap companies. Everything. I guess bootstrapping a company back then, it's not the same as bootstrapping it nowadays, right? If you had to start a company nowadays, how would you do it? Would you do it any different?
Well, it depends upon what kind of company you're starting. Um, when I started Micrel back in 1978, it was mainly done with venture capital. They usually raise about $50 million, and they start a semiconductor company. So when I started my company, uh, it if you didn't have venture capital, you really couldn't do it. And so I didn't want to be a venture capital funded. So I had to go to the banks, and the banks didn't want to fund a startup. And so then I said, well, now what do I do? And so, I had to be willing to agree to a lot of really ridiculous onerous covenants to be able to get the company started. So today, I think it's a little more friendly for banking. I'm not sure about. I haven't started a company for 40 or something years, and so it's times has changed, and I'm not sure if you can do it with or without venture capital. So I'm not too up on what how you would bootstrap it now, except maybe go through angel funding. I think you said you were an angel funder, Alex, and I am also. I'm an angel funder, and so maybe that's a way that you can do it is through angel funding because they're less onerous than the true venture capital guys.
It's funny you mentioned that you didn't want to go the VC route, but nowadays this option is quite viable. But in the 70s, like, was that a contrarian take, or why didn't you want to take VC money?
Well, the problem is with the if you're venture capital funded, they're micromanaging you. They're sitting right on top of you, demanding that you take the company public, in 5 to 7 years after you start the company. And that's not a problem. I wasn't concerned about that, but I just didn't want them telling me how to run the company because then I didn't feel like I had control. And I was having some anxiety about that, and I wanted to own the company. I didn't want them to own it, and that was the other issue. So we just agreed to go with the bank debt rather than with venture funding. If I had to do it over again back in the 70s, I would still do it the way I did it, and I think we would still been just as successful. So there's many ways you can start companies. It's not something that's one way or the highway. And so you have to look at what your strategy is, what your goal is, what your objective is, and then you can decide then how you want to fund it.
In fact, when you mentioned that you're also a business angel, I, as a business angel myself, I see too many companies nowadays trying to raise VC funds when their business model cannot really sustain that kind of growth or deliver the kind of returns a VC would expect, right? And I'm talking sometimes it's like a retail company. It can be a restaurant chain. It can be like some brand producing some kind of shoes, and that might be a relatively good investment for a business angel, but not a VC. So it's funny that you mentioned it nowadays. I guess that there were fewer options back then. The other thing that I really, as a business that it's bootstrap like ours, like MarsBased, we are perceived oftentimes as not ambitious, right? Bootstrap businesses are not ambitious because according to VCs, you will not have the capital to deploy like sufficient scale, or you will not be able to run faster than the competition and all of that. That is nowadays. But was this perception already around in the 70s that bootstrap companies were not as ambitious as VC backed ones?
Well, that's true. They told me, I was just a few miles from Sand Hill Road where all the VCs are, and they all said, well, you can't grow the company fast enough and well enough, unless you're VC funded. So it's true. So it took me about, let's see, so 20 years. It took me to, no, not 20, 15 years. It took me, 15 or 16. It took me 16 years to be able to take the company public. And so if you were venture funded, you could do it in, say, 5 to 10 years, depending upon your model. So it took me a little longer, maybe 50% longer. But that's okay. I was willing to go a little longer. As Orson Welles says, no wine before it's time. And so, you do it when you can do it, when you have that scale and that ability to take your company public. And so, yes, I think that back in my time, back in the 70s, or actually when I went public in the 90s, let's say, the banks were reluctant to even take me public because I didn't have the venture backing. The venture guys take priority, and so that did worry me, and I was concerned that I might not be able to take the company public because I didn't have any backing, and so there are some restrictions. You're gonna pay the price depending upon what your goal is. So, if you're venture funded, you'll have them pushing to take you public. So if you're doing it on your own, then you have to fight your way in as you would.
Actually, one of the things that have really changed in the technology or the startup landscape is, whereas before a company would go public, and I'm talking about like the 90s and stuff like that, before the 10th year of the company. Now companies take way longer to go to pursue an IPO, right? I don't know if the role, maybe the increasing appearance and presence of VCs have accelerated this road to IPO. And before that, before the 90s, where VC money was not so prominent, maybe you didn't have that urge to go public, right? And companies would IPO with, maybe I'm saying something stupid. I don't remember the exact numbers because I was like 3 years old in 1990, right? But I think companies would IPO with 10 or 20 million in revenue, whereas nowadays they wait until hundreds of millions in annual revenue, right? What has changed, in just barely these 20 odd years?
Well, the IPO market has not been that great, at least over the last 5 or 6 years. So I've invested in, I would say, roughly 20 IPOs in the last year, and I've lost money, and so because the bank that green shoe, the bank is able to allocate some money to people who want to invest in the IPO, and so I did. I was with Goldman Sachs and I was able to invest in lots of IPOs, but I've lost money. So what's happening is that the demand by the VCs is that they want you to go at a higher price, and so they argue on price, and that's in today's market. When I did it, I was able to, because I want everybody to make money. I was able to go in at a lower price. In other words, make sure there's a premium on the stock before I took it public. Does that make sense? So, but today, the IPOs are way overpriced. I'd say they're probably 10 to 25% overpriced when they go public, and no one's making money. I told Goldman that I'm not going to invest in any more IPOs. I'm done, because all I do is lose money.
When you mentioned that the IPO was at risk because they were hesitant that a bootstrap company wouldn't be a great fit for an IPO, was it because having a VC funding does not only provide certain economic comfort and cushion, but also you are way more audited. You have been more audited throughout every round. than being a bootstrap company where you don't have to give explanations to anybody else. Maybe. I don't know if that's the rationale as well.
Well, it's certainly the auditing function it was important because if you're not going to go public, you don't have to have all that auditing cost. But if your plan is to go public, then you're going to have to do it even if it takes you 50 years. You know what I mean? Because you got to have that. You have to have that discipline and that comport to do it. And that's what we did. We made sure that we were audited every single year, even though we weren't public. So that was 16 years that I was auditing and paying all that money. But if I didn't do it, then I had very little chance of being able to take the company public.
Well, exactly. You've been super meticulous and rigorous about your financials. I have been reading, and I think you only allowed yourself to be 1 quarter per year not profitable. And because you were a bootstrap company, you had to be profitable all the times. And I, off the top of my head, I remember there was only 1 year where you ran the company at a loss, if I remember correctly. So there's that rigidness and that being so strict on financials. Maybe that was part of the success to becoming a company that IPO'd in the end.
Well, I wanted to be profitable. I didn't want to lose money. And that was my goal, my mission. That may be not the mission of other startups.
Because it's your money, right?
Yes, exactly.
You bootstrap, it's your money, exactly.
Yeah, it's like when you get a rental car. You know, do you treat it better or the same as you do your own car? I doubt it. You know, or if you
Good analogy.
or if you rent an Airbnb, you know, you don't treat it the same way you do your own home. And so, if you're a venture funded company, you tend to, it's not your company really, because you're owned by a whole bunch of other people before you even take the company public, and so you're less scrupulous in the way you manage your funds. For example, the venture guys, they want to go through 5 or 6 rounds, and so they want you to spend money. They want you down to where you own nothing. So when I went public and I owned over 30% of the company when we took it public, maybe it's higher than that, maybe close to 40%. And so the return is higher once you go public. You might not be as big as one that was a venture capital funded company, but you own more of it, and you have that feeling of ownership. You know, it's like owning your own home versus renting a home. And so, the non-venture funded companies, as you say, the bootstrap guys, they feel like they own it and they take care of it better, as opposed to the VC funded ones, which they don't. They say, well, I only own, 15, 20% of the company and blah, blah, blah. And so they don't put the time and effort in to running it, as well as you would if you were bootstrapped or running it as funding it yourself.
Exactly. Look, I am very vocal for bootstrap companies, and I think on this podcast, in 5 years of episodes, we have already said everything that is good about bootstrap businesses. But, like you say in your book, right, tough things first. At a certain time, there are certain situations in our company that being bootstrap has held us back, right? Precisely, not having maybe a large amount of money in the bank, or maybe because it's your own money, you treat it differently, you're more scrupulous, and therefore you don't overspend in certain experiments that probably you would have done with VC-backed money, and they can be, a turning point into the company. And because you don't want to risk that much, because you're bootstrap and you feel like you're losing your money, not somebody else's, maybe that held us back many times in the company. In which situations being bootstrap has been like something contrary to your success or something that held you back?
You mean because I'm bootstrapped? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because you were bootstrapped, yeah.
So when we started the company, we had to be profitable every year because the bank covenants required us to do that. So I had to change the strategy of the company, and we couldn't develop our own products until 1985, which is 7 years after we started the company before I could even develop my own products. And that's what held me back going public, was I didn't have my own products. I was doing services. I was running basically a service business because it paid every 30 days. And where you're developing your own products, you're talking 3 to 7 years to develop your own products. And so that's that difference that I said earlier between the companies that were venture funded. They went out, 5 to 6 years before I did, because they had already started right off developing their products, whereas I couldn't. I had to have enough money and resources to do that, and that took me 7 years to be able to start developing my own products. But that's a choice I made. If you're young, in your 20s or 30s, you still got time. If you're in your 50s and you're trying to start a company, you're done. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to do it. So I'd say if you're a bootstrap company, I wouldn't even attempt it unless you're in your 30s or your early 40s at the most. I'd say very latest your early 40s, and then if you're in your 50s and 60s, you're kind of done anyway. So I don't know very many 50 or 60-year-olds that are starting companies that are going to be able to take it public. Now, you don't have to take a company public. You can merge it or sell it. You're not limited to just the IPO market.
Yeah, exactly. And M&A is another thing that, not having VC money behind you might be a constraint, right? But you might be restricted to buying really small companies or not being able to afford the cash up front to merge with other companies, right? You would say you want to buy a competition or a team whose technology is adjacent to yours and it could complement. With VC money, maybe you could effectively deploy this money to make that operation. Yeah. Whereas being bootstrapped, you're a little bit more tight with the money, right? I don't know if you did any M&A. I haven't been able to research that, but did you have like some complexities regarding money when it comes to M&A, or how did you approach it?
Well, we didn't do M&A at that. Take that back. We did acquire a company before we went public. I think that was in 91 or the late 80s or early 90s. I did acquire a company, and so you can do that, before you go public. And was that a smart choice? The answer is depends. Depends upon what your objective is. But you certainly can acquire other companies, and you can acquire companies with products, and that'll bootstrap you. That'll get you going, you quicker also. But again, if you're going to buy a company, you're still going to need money to do that. Or if you merged, you're going to give up some of your ownership. In our case, we actually bought the company with debt, but could I have merged? And there was an opportunity for us to acquire a company through a merger, but then I would be diluted quite a bit to do that. So there's no magic answer. It's just what suits your goal and objective. If you're in your 50s and 60s, you're gonna want to bail pretty early. If you're in your 20s, you can hang in there for 15, 20 years to make it happen. So, I think it's age dependent, Alex.
Well, that brings me to something that is also really interesting. That is having had the longest tenure of a CEO in Silicon Valley, means like has got a lot of implications. One of them being usually founders might not be the CEO to take the company past certain stages, right? There are certain founders that fire starters. So from 0 to 1, they're really good. But once they're past 50 people, 100 people, then they just quit or they self-demote themselves. They bring a professional CEO. Moreover, there are other founders that can go longer than that, but they will not take the company public. You've done the entire trajectory, right? How have you trained yourself mentally to overcome the obstacles? I don't know if you had imposter syndrome. Like, there's not a lot of people like you. You're a rat avis.
Oh, well, the statistics are that 9 out of 10 companies fail within the first 3 years. So you have to be unusual. You got to be in the top 10, as they say, to survive. I wouldn't say I was lucky because I went through 8 downturns, and
Wow.
in 2002 I lost half my customers with that .com implosion, and so you have to be resilient. You got to be as tough as nails. You can't if you're wishy-washy, if you're not confident in what you're doing. You see, I have no fear. I have absolutely zero fear, and so fear is the biggest inhibitor of growth. If you're afraid, don't do it. And so I had no fear, and so that was really a mainstay to my ability to be Silicon Valley's longest serving CEO. Was I was resilient, and you couldn't take me down. If you look at all the good athletes, you can't take them down. The only athletes you can take down are the ones that don't have that passion, don't have that drive, don't have that enthusiasm. It takes a lot of self-discipline, doing what you don't like doing and doing it well. As I say in my book, I learned to love the things I hate. And if you can't do that, if you can't love the things you hate, you're done. You got to be able to get knocked down and get right back up again. Get knocked down, get right back up again. If you get bucked off the horse, get right back on it. If you say, hey, I don't want to do that again, you're done. That's why 9 out of 10 companies fail within the first 3 years, is because they can't get back up. They get knocked down and they stay down. So you got to be resilient, Alex.
Resilience is certainly one of the traits. The mental fortitude is another one. But having read a lot of biographies of great CEOs and like famous athletes, they also have got great coaches. So who was your support? Have you had like a board, maybe like co-founders, advisors, like family, some people you admired that they were supporting you in the toughest of the times?
Yes, that having a good mentor is extremely important. And I did have a good team. They weren't external, they were internal. So I had, when I was down, my partner was up. When he was down, I was up. We were supporting. It's like a good marriage, okay? In a good marriage, there's no divorce. You don't even think about divorce. And so if you have the right team, the right mentors, whether it be on your board, whether it be your family, whether it be your neighbors or other cohorts in your industry, you have to have a good mentors, because you have to have somebody helping you stay afloat, as you would help you. Somebody's got to help you bail a boat, as they say. And so, you do have to have a good team and a good mentor relationship with your team.
What if, you mentioned a couple of situations that look pretty rough, and but I don't know if they were like the worst days at the office. We always like asking about the worst days at the office, precisely because we want to help to democratize it and to open it up to the rest of the audience. Because usually when you hear podcasts, when you listen to podcasts, people are like, yeah, my company's the best. We got the best team. We are so awesome. We're just making millions and our product is unbeatable. And the reality is every company suffers, right? We all have got highs and lows. And I think we would profit, all of us would profit, if we made it more extensible to the rest of the world what our worst days at the office have been.
Yeah, well, so I had to learn to love my competition. Okay. And so you have to, if you hate your competition, you're already got one strike against you. It's just like in a football game. If you didn't have an opponent to play against, you're not going to make it. You got to love your opponent. I know that sounds strange because we think about, trash talking our opponent and so forth. But that's all bravado, trash talking. But I mean, you got, if you admire and love your competition, you're going to grow. I tell you, the worst thing that can happen to you if you get so down on your competition that it detracts what you're doing, then you lose. I remember when I was in debate, the way I won a debate was to get my opponent mad at me, and because all he could think about was something to come back on. Something you can see it in politics a lot. There's a lot of trash talking in politics, and right. So you got to love your competition, you got to admire them, and you got to fight them. It's if you're in a football game, your opponent's trying to kill you. I mean, he's trying to take you out. He'll do anything to take you out. Sometimes it's honest, sometimes it's dishonest. But you got to be ready for your competition, and you got to love them. Meaning you have to admire them, and that way you grow and learn. If all you're going to do is badmouth and trash talk, but you're not doing about it, you're going to lose. So, every day can be the worst day at the office, and that's the same thing. You can't go into a football game or a soccer game and think that the competition is not going to try to do you in. If you think that you're always going to come out on top, you're going to lose. And so that's why I said you got to learn to love the things you hate. That includes your competition. You got to love your competition, and you learn to love them by admiring what they got, their skills and so forth. And you try to improve what you can do, so that you can become, the top of the competition as you would.
This speech is truly something leader material, right? Is that something that probably you would use in your company to rally the troops? And one of the things that also being like having had your trajectory is you probably have seen the change of leadership roles, right? I don't think being a leader it's the same in the 70s, was the same in the 70s as in the 90s are right now, right? For what I've seen in the last 20 years that I've been involved in business is right now, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show some fragility to the team, to lead with empathy, to lead with another set of traits that perhaps 25 years ago, they were perceived as weak, right? I don't know if you have trained yourself to overcome all of these changes in the market, and how have you adopted the sensibility of saying, oh, this is not right anymore. It was right 20 years ago. Now I have to lead with this other approach.
Well, that's that Who Moved the Cheese book. I don't know if you ever heard of that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. I love it.
Yeah. So Who Moved the Cheese? If you don't move with the times, you're going to lose. Okay. It's called the buggy whip syndrome. If you're afraid to use AI, if you're afraid to use new technology, new ways, you're going to lose. You got to move with the times. You got to follow the cheese. You just can't go the same way all the time. Because technology changes. And if you're not willing to adapt the new technology, you're gone.
What inspired you to write The Essential Leader? Now going into book material, because we could have talked more about Tough Things First, but it's a book that's already 10 years old. You have already discussed it publicly many, many times. And I wanted to focus more on your current book. And you probably have seen some things like watching from the sidelines or not being as actively involved anymore that made you reflect upon the role of a leader. What is the essential leader about, and how can we construct this role?
We've been talking about that this whole time.
I know.
This whole discussion that we've had, Alex, is what's basically in my book, The Essential Leader. Being able to have passion, have a mission, be a servant leader. A shepherd, the sheep follow the shepherd because the shepherd loves them. Okay. The sheep don't follow the shepherd because he hates them. They follow the shepherd because the shepherd takes care of them. And I always did that with my people. I took care of my people. I cover all that in my book. essential leader. There's 10 ways that I break it down into how you become an effective and essential leader. And this whole discussion, Alex, which you've done beautifully, by the way, thank you, is you've covered my book by virtue of asking me all these questions and how I did it. That's what's in essentially. You can learn so much from that book as to how to be a good leader in good times and bad. In fact, the best leaders are the ones that go through unbelievable tragedy and adversity. Those become the best leaders. If you haven't been knocked down, you don't know what it feels like. So you got to be able to get knocked down and get right back up again. And so the essential leader is one who's durable, who's compassionate, who is sensitive, who's willing to love things he hates. That's a key. Loving what you hate is very key. And I can tell you right now, Alex, there's nothing that I hate, because I will keep at it. As Waldo Emerson said, that which you persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the nature of the task changes, but your ability to perform becomes easier. So you got to keep at the stuff that you hate. If you just procrastinate things you hate, you're not going to get ahead. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Today's a present. That's why they call it a gift. You can only act today. You can't act tomorrow or yesterday. You got to act today. And that's what I talk about in the book, is don't procrastinate. Do what you don't like doing what you don't like doing and doing it well. That's the key to discipline. And the best athletes are the ones that don't just practice during practice time. They practice after practice time. So, when I'm driving to work, or when I'm going home, or when I'm eating lunch, I'm still practicing. I don't just go out and take it easy. I'm constantly reviewing, analyzing where I've been, what I've done, what can I do better? Where's the cheese? I'm constantly trying to figure out what can I do to improve. And so that's that, constant self-improvement that helps us become better. And we don't just quit because I retired in 2015, but I'm not done. I'm still writing books. I'm on my 7th book. And it's hard. It's not easy to do, but I love it. If it's not hard to do, I don't want to do it. I want to do what I really don't like doing. And then I become better at doing what I don't like doing.
Look, after having built that massive company and having IPO'd it, I think that writing a book should be a walk in the park. But maybe I am mistaken. I've only written a book, and I said I'm not going to do this again in 10 years. Not because it was hard. It was precisely because I found it very easy, but because it's in me. I love writing, right? But other people might find it difficult because you have got so many more ideas that you wanted to condense in a book, and therefore it was so difficult perhaps to do it under 500 pages, right? And I didn't have enough material. So for me, it was like, yeah, fine. It will only be 150 pages. No, jokes aside, the other thing is, the other essential trait of a leader is being able to choose who accompanies him, right? And you probably have undergone several changes, hopefully not a lot, of the leadership team in the company, board level, C-level, VP level, and of the, how consistent have these teams been, and how do you approach a change in these critical teams, like when you have to fire somebody at like a C-level or they leave? How do you structure yourself mentally to face that challenge?
Well, as you indicated earlier, change is with us. I mean, change is like who moved the cheese. Change is with us all the time. And where you get board member changes. I remember when the activists came in and tried to change our strategy of the company, I had to hire new board members, but the board members had to be approved by the activists, and of course they're more activist type board members. That was a challenge, trying to deal with a board that you didn't select or didn't necessarily want. The board member that you would like to choose. That becomes a real challenge. And so I ended up with a less than amicable board, and so I had to deal with that. I had to deal with a difficult board, and that was a good challenge for me. Again, that was loving the things I hated. I didn't particularly care for my board, but I had to work with them, and I had to deal with that. And you're going to have employees the same way. You're going to have employees that you need, but not necessarily that you love. And so you got to learn to love them, and that helps you grow from that experience. And so, I mean, after running this company for 37 years, and as you mentioned, I only lost money one year, and that was in 2002. I tried my best not to lose money. I had a lot of sleepless nights trying to be able to salvage that record, that perfect record of no losses. So it wasn't that I just said ho hum, let it happen. I worked at it. I struggled with it, and even though I lost money in 2002, I only lost $50,000. I say only. I mean, it was a small amount. I thought, can't I find
it hurt your pride, right? Because it broke the chain.
Right. So at the end, we couldn't make it happen without being dishonest. And so I had to go in and accept that loss. It was very painful. I don't think I slept for 3 nights. And that's just because I hated losing money so bad. See, I hate to lose more than I like to win. So, again, I hate losing, and so winning is not as important as not losing. So,
but you said you learn to love the things you hate. You hate losing, so you learn to love how to hate losing.
Exactly.
That is very complicated. That is very complicated.
Exactly.
Look,
you learn to love losing, but it's hard.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
But you have to accept it, and so some things sound really difficult if you have a board that you don't care for, or if you have employees you don't care for. You got to find out a way to love them. Otherwise, you're going to lose. That's why I said you got to hate to lose more than you want to win, and so you just got to learn to deal with it and overcome it. Everyone's going to face challenges. I don't care, how Steve Jobs or Jack Gifford or whoever, you just can't. You have to learn to deal with adversity. And you got to learn to love adversity. Remember, I said earlier, you got to learn to love your competition, and because you'll deal with them better if you do. Or a customer. Maybe you have a difficult customer. You got to learn to love a customer that you hate, okay, and who is not treating you properly. So the book Essential Leader covers everything that you and I have been talking about today, only in more detail, Alex.
It seems to me like this story about not or losing the money, but hating losing the money, is like a good example of how ego can be turned into superpower, right? Your ego that you didn't want to lose money made you like go for an extra effort, and you were almost able to avoid losing money, but you didn't in the end, right? But probably other years, they were tough. You were about to lose money. Your ego gave you that boost, and you avoided this situation completely.
Exactly.
But ego is a double-edged sword. There have been certainly certain situations where your ego has drawn you back, like where you probably didn't play like the right card, or where you felt like your ego betrayed you as a CEO.
Mm-hmm. Well, your culture, if you say you have the right kind of culture, then your ego follows that culture, and so the culture that I talk about in the book is honesty, integrity, dignity of every individual, and then doing what takes, no excuses, and so that becomes your ego. Okay, if your ego is losing money, you don't care, you don't care for your employees. I'm greater and better than them, if that becomes your ego, then it's the wrong kind of ego-driven company. So you want your ego to match good things, good characteristics like honesty, integrity, respecting everyone, and doing whatever it takes. No excuses. I call an excuse a reason wrapped in a bag of poop. And so, that you don't want excuses. You never want to have an excuse. And you avoid excuses by correcting your mistakes immediately. And that's what I did, is that if I made a mistake, I corrected it instantly. I didn't procrastinate it, and I worked on it. I said, okay, why did we lose money? What was our problem? What could I have done different? The worst day in your office, as you would. And so you don't have a bad ego, have a good ego. So let's refer to an ego that I promote, which is having a good ego, which is being kind to people, being ethical, being conscious of other people and their issues and problems. If I had an employee with a difficult situation, I would take extra time to try to understand and try to be a mentor toward them, helping them work through that problem or difficulty that they're facing, whether it be a loss of a loved one, whether it be an illness that they're facing, whether it be a problem with the product that they're working on, whatever their problem is, I was there for them. That's that shepherd who is loved by his sheep, because the shepherd loves his sheep. And I love my employees. I loved them.
The problem with a lot of CEOs nowadays is they are wolves in sheepskin, and so they look like shepherds, but they rule with fear, right? And especially in downturns, I think it's relatively easy in war times to become that sort of authoritarian leader. Being a CEO, not that I condone it, obviously, but we've seen plenty of these examples. Look, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because we don't often have CEOs who have IPO'd their company, and I think there's an important part of personal growth in all your journey, which is scale, and more specifically, personal scaling yourself. As a person, as a leader, as a CEO, it's very difficult to scale a company with the business, with the technology, the people, and also the decision making. Where is the area in which you found it more difficult to scale yourself in these 4 divisions that I mentioned?
Well, if you listen to my board, it's because I was afraid not to lose money. And so they thought that was restricting our growth because I didn't want to lose money. But
Okay.
you're giving up if you violate your own morals, your own standards, no matter how much your board pushes you or others, you're not going to win. I think the reason we won was because we didn't let our ego or our board or others push us in the wrong direction. So my goal was to be profitable. That was my goal, my vision. And so I had to run the company with that bottom line view. And I'd had others, like and especially these antagonistic investors, that adversarial investors, or my board, or they said, why are you so focused on making money? Because I said, profitable companies don't go out of money. It's unprofitable companies that go out of money. That means they go out of business. So, but I had to stick by my guns when I said that I was going to focus on making money rather than just growing the top line. So, growing the top line seems to be what the venture capital want. That's what the IPO people want. The banks, they want to see your top line. But I'm not going to grow my top line at the expense of my bottom line. So they have to be together. You can't, my employees, I think, admired the fact that we were profitable. They felt more comfortable that we were profitable. And so my goal was, don't grow the top line at the expense of the bottom line. Does that answer that question, Alex?
It does. And I actually wanted to give a shout out to all the bootstrap companies, because I think there are very few bootstrap companies that make it that big. And I think that's something very remarkable. And we should give voice precisely to companies like yours and leaders like you who have been advocating for bootstrapping, for being profitable. Because I think a lot of startups, especially nowadays, they have the head in the clouds and they don't worry about making money. They just worry about like, oh, maybe my product, my competition. They worry about all of this mental wonkery. But companies die most of the time because they don't know how to make money, right? And so I think we should be spreading the love of bootstrapping more and more often. And I think your vision and your insights contribute to that. What is the legacy that you want to pass on in terms of business? Like, obviously you've built your books, your career, your values, and all of these, the moral compass that you have been guiding your employees with. But what do you want to pass on as a legacy to the business world?
Don't put top line more important than the bottom line, and being loved by your employees. We had the lowest turnover in the entire industry.
Oh, wow.
And so my legacy is that employees that want to stay with you, that want to support you, and that they're there for you in good times and bad, just like a marriage, okay? Until death do you part, okay? And so, to me, my employees admiring our vision, our the moral character of the company was more important than becoming wealthy. I told my people when I hire them, an employee, I said, I'm not going to make you rich. That's your job. Your job is to make yourself rich. But what I will help you do is become a better person. So my legacy is what my goal is today is to help Alex Rodriguez be a better podcast. My goal is to help you. I'm not worrying about me. I'm worrying about how can I help you have a better podcast today. That was my goal before I logged on to talk to you is what can I do to help you become a better podcaster? That was my goal.
And I think you already did it because not a lot of people go out of the way like you've done, doing like a preparation chat and like sending interesting stuff and for me to prep. A couple quick questions before we go because we're running out of time and I want to be very conscious of your time. You probably have got other commitments. So one of them, as you mentioned, you had very low employee attrition. And in the industry, that is very rare. We at MarsBased, the company it's almost 12 years old. A couple of employees are 10 years into the company. One is 11 years into the company. Most of them are 7, 8, 9. This is very rare in a technological company. So what have you done differently? What was your secret sauce to having employees stick around for so long?
It's I think the culture of the company is what did it. Having that good culture. I had a company picnic one time, and husband and wife came. The wife worked for us, but the husband did not. And he said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And we went over to a grove of trees, and he says, I want to know what's so unique about your company, because my wife and I had filed for divorce, and when she joins your company, everything changed. She become a much different person. We went to counseling. We dropped the divorce, and he says, and he had tears in his eyes. He says, "Thank you for saving our marriage." So I wasn't just paying her to work. I was helping her marriage. Okay. And so people want to stay. Half the employees that left our company came back. 50% boomerang. They came back. Why? Because they said it's not good to work for a company that you don't feel honored and loved and respected. And so they came back. And so we welcomed them back. So that's the key, is to retain people. You have to provide an environment where they want to stay.
But if they leave, they want to come back to that, right? That is unheard of, right? The closest I can tell you is like we got the same with clients. Sometimes they leave the company and they go for something else. They try to internalize the development and they come back to us. They're like, we couldn't do it better, right? So we haven't had any employee coming back yet, but also not many have left in these 12 years. Last question, right? And this is a signature question of the podcast. and I feel compelled to ask it, even though, you probably will not be able to summarize this in just one answer, but everybody fucks up. And we like asking everybody, all of our guests, to share what has been their biggest fuck up in the company and how much money did it cost.
How much money did what cost, Alex?
A mess up, like something that you messed up as a CEO.
Okay, so because of the fact that I corrected my mistakes immediately, there's no cost. In other words, no harm, no foul. So
Okay.
there's no big mistake if you fix it. So I can't think. I have no regrets, Alex, none. And so, as you know, I focus on the bottom line, and so mistakes cost the bottom line. And so if you're going to minimize the impact to the bottom line, you got to correct the mistake immediately, not in a day or two. I mean, immediately you have to correct it. And so that's what we did, is we corrected our mistakes immediately. And so I can't think of anything was the most harmful mistake I ever made. That does, it kind of goes against the culture that I try to develop in the company. That's why I said doing whatever it takes, no excuses. Remember, I said that was one of the cultures of the company. So that's what you do. If you correct a mistake, then there's no harm. And so that's, we all make mistakes. I made mistakes every day, but I fixed them. So then there's no harm. If you fix a mistake, there's no harm. So the cost of a mistake is really your effort to repair it. That's the cost of a mistake. So, and you try to avoid that because there's cost to you to do it, but it don't cost the company. I tell my employees, you fix a mistake, don't make the company pay for that. And so same with me as a CEO. I said, if I make a mistake, I'm going to fix it on my own. I'm not going to make the company pay for it.
Right. Last question before I let you go. I'm rolling out the red carpet for you. We got this community of thousands of people who listen to Live on Mars, our podcast. How can they help you? We want to help you back to repay the favor.
Well, by making this podcast that you and I are doing, making it extremely successful, by promoting it, getting it out there to more people. If you can find a way to get this podcast, the number one podcast that you have, that will help me.
That's fantastic.
Can you do that?
Thank you very much for your. I think we can do it in a collective effort of all the MarsBased Life on Mars community. We'll make it happen. So thank you very much for your generosity and for your insights. And I could be talking to you for 4 more hours because I got tons of questions, but I guess we'll have to save that for a second edition someday in the future. So thank you very much.
Well,
Ray.
if you want to do another podcast, just get a hold of Julie. And schedule it. And I'm more than happy to spend whatever time it takes to help you become successful.
Thank you very much.